Imagine you're sitting across from two men who've spent decades questioning everything: religion, culture, truth, and meaning. This isn't a debate. It's not about who's right. It's about peeling back the layers of belief and asking, why do we believe what we believe? You'll feel the tension, the respect, the curiosity. You'll hear things you've thought in secret but never said out loud. You'll walk away unsettled but clearer. This is what happens when you put intellect and honesty in the same room with no fear of consequence. You're not here to be told what to think. You're here to think deeper. This isn't just Jordan Peterson talking religion. It's a search for truth, raw, unfiltered, and human. 15 minutes that'll leave your brain buzzing for days. What we believe isn't always what we are, and what we are isn't always what we believe. Jordan Peterson makes that distinction clear when he talks about identity versus belief. He's not talking in riddles. He's pointing to a quiet truth that most people miss in themselves. Think about it. How many people go to church or the mosque or claim they follow a faith, but never truly live it? How many people wear the label of a religion like a jacket, but underneath their character is stitched from something else entirely? That's not hypocrisy. That's confusion. It's inherited identity without personal belief, and it's everywhere. Imagine a man who says he's a Christian. He grew up in a Christian home. He prays when others pray. He nods when someone mentions God, but when life knocks him down, when his marriage is crumbling, or his job falls apart, or his health takes a dive, he doesn't turn to his faith. He turns to distraction, or to anger, or to escape. His belief was never tested because it was never really his. It was inherited, absorbed, not chosen. That's identity without belief. Now flip it. Imagine someone who never grew up religious, no rituals, no rules, but he's hungry for meaning. He's kind, disciplined, and honest with himself. He's seeking something more, something solid. So he begins to explore ideas, reflect on human suffering, truth, love, the sacred. Maybe he doesn't even use religious language, but he lives with reverence, with humility, with the awareness that life is not just material. Belief begins to take shape, not as a label, but as a fire inside. That's belief without identity. And it's more real than 1,000 unchallenged routines. Identity can be comforting. It gives you a group, a flag, a sense of belonging. It's tribal, and tribalism feels safe. But belief is personal. Belief is earned. Belief grows in silence, in darkness, in the moments where you're alone and no one's watching. Belief shows up when life squeezes you and your soul speaks louder than your voice. Belief doesn't care what you wear or what building you worship in. It cares about how you carry yourself when there's nothing left but your conscience. Peterson challenges us to stop lying to ourselves. He says if you claim to believe something, test it, live it, push it against the wall, and see if it holds. Don't repeat ideas like they're part of a costume. Speak them like they came from your own soul. He says belief should make you better, not just more correct. It should elevate your behavior, sharpen your words, humble your pride. If it doesn't, then maybe it's just identity playing dress up. Look at daily life. How many people say they believe in forgiveness, but won't forgive the person who wronged them 5 years ago? How many say they believe in truth, yet lie to protect their ego? How many say they believe in discipline, but quit every hard thing they start? The mirror doesn't lie. Peterson's point hits hard. Belief is action, not just ideas. True belief shapes your identity, not the other way around. And when that happens, people notice, not because you're loud, but because you're solid. You become one of those rare people who doesn't waver in chaos, who doesn't break when things go wrong, who walks into the fire and still carries something calm and unshakable in their eyes. That's the kind of presence that doesn't need to preach. It just is. And others feel it. It's not performance, it's transformation. So the challenge is real. Figure out if what you call your identity is actually your belief, because when life punches hard, only one of them will hold, and if it doesn't, maybe it's time to burn the label and build something real from the ground up. Belief that comes from fire will never fall apart when the wind comes. There's a tension most people never recognize, but it shapes the very core of how they see the world. Some people are chasing meaning, while others are clinging to order. Jordan Peterson describes this contrast as logos versus law. It's not about religion in the surface sense, about the blueprint that drives your soul. Logos, in its essence, is the pursuit of truth, reason, and divine purpose. Law, on the other hand, is structure, rule, discipline, and the external boundary that holds chaos back. Both are powerful, both are necessary, but one asks you to think, The other demands you obey. Look around in life, you'll see people who live by law. They follow the rules, not because they understand them, but because the rules are there. They get up, clock in, perform their duties, follow expectations, and when something breaks, they freeze. They look for instructions, for someone to tell them what to do. That's the danger of a life built only on law. When the rules no longer apply, they're lost. The map they followed so carefully no longer leads anywhere, and suddenly they have to face something terrifying, responsibility. Now contrast that with the power of Logos. Logos doesn't wait to be told. Logos doesn't blindly follow. Logos seeks, questions, struggles, and reshapes. It asks why. It asks what's behind the rule, what's beneath the surface. It's what gives you the courage to step into the unknown when there's no script. Logos is what lets a man walk away from a system that no longer aligns with truth. It's what lets a woman rebuild her life from scratch after being shattered, not because she was told how, but because something inside her refused to accept a lie. Peterson isn't saying one is good and one is bad. He's saying you need both, but in balance. Law without logos becomes tyranny. Logos without law becomes chaos. Imagine a soldier who follows orders without question, even if those orders lead to destruction. That's law without logos. Now imagine a rebel who tears down every structure in sight, believing only in their emotions. That's logos without law. Both are incomplete. Both are dangerous. You need the structure, but you also need the reason behind it. Otherwise, you're not living, you're just functioning. Think of your own life, the routines you follow every day, the things you do because that's just how it is. Ever stop to ask why? Why you chose this career, why you believe what you believe, why you treat people the way you do. That's logos knocking on your door. It's not comfortable. It doesn't come with guarantees, but it brings meaning, and when you find meaning, the law becomes something else entirely. It becomes discipline, not prison. It becomes direction, not confinement. This is what separates people who survive from people who evolve. Survival is instinct. Evolution is reflection. Law gives you the ground to stand on, but logos is what makes you walk. Law says don't steal. Logos says live with integrity. Law says show up. Logos says show up with purpose. Law says speak the truth. Logos asks what is truth. When you operate from logos, you're not just following life, you're forging it, you're writing your own lines instead of reading someone else's script. You can tell when someone has tapped into logos. They speak differently. They carry themselves with a kind of gravity. They don't shout, they don't preach, but people listen because you can feel it. This person knows why they're here. They've wrestled with their own darkness. They questioned their own beliefs. And what's left is something sharp, something rooted. Their strength isn't loud, but it's undeniable. They don't crumble when the system breaks, they rise, because they were never relying on the system to begin with. They were guided by something deeper, something unshakable, something real. They submission versus transformation. Two completely different energies, and yet they both ask something from the soul. Jordan Peterson doesn't just throw these words around like buzzwords. He digs into what they really mean beneath the surface. Submission is about surrendering to something higher than yourself. It's order, structure, clarity. Transformation is about changing from within, becoming something more than you were yesterday. It's growth through pain, chaos, fire. Both paths are spiritual. Both require courage, but they take you through different doors. Think about submission in everyday life. Most people follow routines not because they chose them, but because life handed them a script. Wake up, go to work, pay the bills, smile when you're supposed to, keep your head down. It's safe, it's quiet, no questions asked. But sometimes that same submission becomes a prison. Sometimes people aren't submitting to something noble. They're submitting to fear, to comfort, to other people's expectations. They're not surrendering to a higher truth. They're just hiding from the unknown. Transformation, on the other hand, is brutal. It doesn't ask for comfort. It asks for honesty. It's when you stop pretending. It's when you look in the mirror and admit, this isn't working, and then you do something about it. You leave the job that's killing your soul. You walk away from the relationship that drains you. You confront your addictions. You face your own lies. That's transformation. It doesn't feel holy. It feels like chaos. But through that chaos, you change. Jordan Peterson talks about how both submission and transformation are central to belief systems. One says, bow before God. The other says, become the image of God. Both are powerful, but the difference is in the direction. Submission looks upward. Transformation looks inward. Submission says, I am nothing without you. Transformation says, I will become more because of what you've shown me. Submission is the first step. Transformation is the journey after. A man who lives only in submission may never question the structure around him. He may do the right things for the wrong reasons. He may follow every rule but lose his soul in the process. And a man who lives only for transformation may burn every bridge, challenge every system, and forget that some structure exists for a reason. But when you combine the two, something remarkable happens. A kind of strength is born, not the strength that flexes, the strength that endures. Take a woman who's been stuck in a toxic cycle for years. She believed she had to submit to her circumstances. She believed life was just about survival. But one day something breaks. She decides to fight, not with fists, but with truth. She picks up a book. She finds her voice. She dares to dream again. She doesn't just obey anymore. She transforms. She becomes someone who can stand alone. And the people who once ignored her, they now listen, not because she demanded power, but because she became power. This is what Jordan Peterson is pushing people to see. Submission to what is sacred is not weakness. Transformation in the face of pain is not rebellion. It's maturity. It's growth. It's the raw and often ugly path to becoming someone who can carry real responsibility. The people you admire most, they've walked both roads. They've bowed when it mattered, and they've bled when it counted. That's why they shine, not because they were chosen, but because they chose to evolve. You want to change your life. Stop choosing one or the other. Stop submitting to mediocrity while pretending it's humility. Stop chasing transformation just to feed your ego. Dig deeper. Find out what you really need to surrender to, and then let that surrender fuel your growth. That's the real revolution, not outside, but inside. Community and unity aren't just social words, they are soul words. Jordan Peterson peels back the surface and shows us something most people ignore. Community isn't about how many people are around you, and unity isn't about everyone agreeing. Real community is built on shared values, on sacrifice, on the unspoken bond that says, we carry this together. And real unity doesn't come from comfort, it comes from hardship. From standing side by side when things fall apart, not just when everything's going fine. You see it in daily life, but most people are blind to it. There's a neighborhood where everyone waves but no one really talks. A workplace where people smile in meetings but secretly compete, quietly waiting for someone else to fall. Those aren't communities. They're crowds. There's no glue there. There's no weight. And when pressure hits, they scatter, because unity built on politeness will always collapse under pain. Now look at a small group that's been through real struggle together. Maybe it's a sports team that went from losing every game to winning through relentless training. Maybe it's a family that lost everything in a storm but rebuilt together, brick by brick. Or a group of recovering addicts that meets every week, sharing raw truth, holding each other accountable. Those are communities, not because they all think the same way, but because they show up when it matters. They bleed together, they rise together. Peterson often points to how Islam has managed to build incredibly strong communities, not by accident but by design. 5 prayers a day, not just personal discipline, but collective rhythm. Fasting, not just personal sacrifice, but shared struggle. Even something like pilgrimage isn't just a solo journey, it's millions moving as one. That kind of unity doesn't just happen. It's built on rituals, sacrifice, responsibility. It demands something from the individual, and in return, it gives something powerful, belonging. But in the modern world, especially in the West, we've become allergic to that kind of structure. We love independence, but we forgot the cost. We want freedom, but we lost connection. Now people sit in their rooms with thousands of followers online and still feel completely alone, because community isn't clicks and likes, it's presence, it's weight. It's when you know that someone will notice if you don't show up. It's when you know you matter not for what you do, but for who you are. Think of the most powerful moments in your life, not the awards, not the applause, but the moments when someone stood with you. Maybe it was a friend who drove for hours just to be at your side during your worst day. Maybe it was a teacher who stayed after class because they believed in you. Maybe it was a stranger who stepped in when others turned away. Those moments stick, not because they were dramatic, but because they reminded you you're not alone, you belong. Jordan Peterson's message here isn't nostalgic, it's urgent. He's saying we need to rebuild what we've lost, not just in religion, not just in culture, but in how we show up for each other. Community is oxygen for the soul. Unity is armor for the storm. You can't thrive without them. And if you don't have them, you'll try to fill the hole with noise, distraction, shallow praise. But deep down, you'll still feel that hunger for a tribe, for a purpose shared, for something sacred that binds you to others who actually care. So maybe it's time to ask not what community gives you, but what you bring to it. Not who stands with you, but who you're willing to stand for. Because unity doesn't begin with agreement. It begins with action. It begins when someone says, "You matter, and I won't let you carry this alone." The shadow side of certainty is one of the most dangerous places a human mind can live, and most people don't even realize they're living there. Jordan Peterson brings it up not as a warning against faith or truth, but as a reminder that anything held too tightly becomes brittle. Certainty feels good, it feels strong, it feels like safety, but behind that feeling, there's a trap. Because the moment you believe you've figured everything out, you stop growing, you stop listening, and slowly, without noticing, you become the kind of person who can't be taught anything anymore. Think about how it shows up in everyday life. A man wakes up every day convinced he knows how the world works. He's got his political beliefs, his spiritual beliefs, his opinions about right and wrong, and nothing can shake them. Ask him a question and he's got an answer before you finish the sentence. He doesn't pause, he doesn't reflect, because in his mind, doubt is weakness, and that's where the shadow begins to grow. The more convinced he is that he's right, the more blind he becomes to what he might be missing. Certainty shuts doors. Certainty builds walls. It gives you a small kingdom to rule, but it keeps you trapped inside that kingdom. You stop asking questions. You stop being curious. You stop wondering. And soon, life isn't something you explore. It's something you defend. You become more interested in protecting your beliefs than actually understanding them. You cling to the feeling of being right even when the facts no longer fit. And worst of all, you start looking at people who disagree with you not as fellow seekers, but as threats. Peterson doesn't say certainty is evil. He says certainty must be earned, and even then, it must be held lightly. It must stay open to refinement. You need confidence, yes, but confidence that breathes, confidence that listens, confidence that knows it might still be wrong and has the courage to keep learning anyway. That's the difference between someone who walks in wisdom and someone who just talks with conviction. Daily life gives 1,000 examples. Think of the person who stays in a toxic job or relationship because they're certain it's their only option. Think of the parent who refuses to understand their child's world because they're certain they already know what's best. Think of the leader who makes decisions without asking questions because they're certain their experience is enough. That kind of certainty doesn't just hurt the person holding it, it hurts everyone around them. The people who inspire you most weren't always sure. They wrestled, they doubted, they questioned everything, even themselves. But instead of letting that destroy them, they let it shape them. They used uncertainty as a tool to carve deeper understanding. They stood for something, but they remained humble, they remained open. And that's why they grew, not in spite of the doubt, but because of it. There's a fire that comes from being certain. But there's a light that only comes from wondering. If you cling too hard to your beliefs without testing them, you don't have belief. You have fear disguised as faith, real confidence, real truth. They all make room for questions. They all leave space for growth. Because the strongest structures aren't the ones built on rigid lines. They're the ones with room to bend when the storm hits. So when you feel yourself gripping too tightly to a truth, pause. Ask where that grip is coming from. Is it courage? Or is it fear? Is it conviction? Or is it ego? Certainty can make you sound strong, but openness will make you unshakable. You don't need to have all the answers. You need to have the strength to keep asking better questions. And that strength, that humility mixed with boldness, that's what makes people powerful in the realest way possible. The danger of losing faith in meaning itself is not just some abstract philosophical idea. It's a slow, invisible unraveling of the human spirit. Jordan Peterson doesn't say this to sound poetic. He says it because it's real, and it's happening right now. When people stop believing that life has meaning, when they start thinking it's all random, all empty, all mechanical, something deep inside begins to break. They don't scream. They don't collapse. They just start to fade. One small compromise at a time, one dead morning at a time, one numbing habit at a time. They still breathe. They still smile. But something is gone. This world tells you to chase happiness, but never tells you what to do when happiness isn't there. This world tells you to be productive, but never teaches you what you're producing for. And slowly, people start asking questions they don't say out loud. What's the point? Why am I doing this? Why should I even care? And when those questions go unanswered long enough, the soul begins to starve. The heart becomes a machine, and the mind becomes a loop of distractions just to keep the silence out. You see it in daily life. Someone wakes up, checks their phone, scrolls for an hour, goes to work, fakes a laugh, comes home, eats, watches another screen, and falls asleep without ever touching something real. They don't cry, they don't scream, they just live in gray. And it's not because they're lazy or stupid. It's because they've quietly lost the belief that their life matters beyond the next task or the next weekend. They've lost the idea that there's something sacred about their existence. And without that, nothing feels worth the fight. Peterson warns that this isn't just personal, it's cultural. When a whole society starts to believe that nothing means anything, that values are just preferences, that truth is whatever feels good today, you get more than confusion. You get collapse. You get people with no spine, no purpose, no ability to endure, because without meaning, pain becomes unbearable. And if you can't explain your suffering, you'll do anything to escape it. Drugs, lies, rage, apathy. The darkest parts of the human soul grow in the vacuum left behind when meaning is abandoned. But there's another side to this, and it's fierce. When you begin to believe that life does have meaning, that your actions echo, that your words shape the world, that your suffering can be used for good, everything changes. You can be broke and still walk with pride. You can be heartbroken and still get up with dignity. You can be surrounded by chaos and still say, I know why I'm here. Because meaning doesn't erase pain. It gives you the strength to carry it. This isn't just motivation. It's survival. The people who endure, who truly endure, are not the ones with the most resources or luck. They're the ones who've looked into the void and decided to build anyway. They've chosen to live as if their life matters, as if their words count, as if their love leaves a mark. And because of that choice, they rise again and again, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. You don't find meaning in comfort. You find it in responsibility, in sacrifice, in standing for something that would be easier to ignore. Meaning shows up when you choose to carry something heavy because you know it's yours to carry. When you look at your pain and say, I won't let this go to waste. When you speak the truth even when your voice shakes. When you give your best even when no one's watching. That's meaning. And it changes everything. People are starving for this. Not more pleasure, not more distraction, but something solid to build their life on. Something they can suffer for without regret. Something that makes the fight worth it. The moment you choose to believe that your life matters is the moment you become dangerous to the darkness. Because a soul armed with meaning can walk through hell and keep walking. Real respect starts with deep listening, not just nodding, not just waiting for your turn to speak. Deep listening. The kind of listening that makes the other person feel seen, not just heard. Jordan Peterson doesn't talk about this like it's a soft skill. He talks about it like it's a survival tool, because when you truly listen to someone, you step out of your own ego, you drop the need to dominate, and you enter a space where truth can actually rise. That space is rare. Most people never go there. Think about the last time someone listened to you, not just pretended, but actually listened. They didn't try to fix you. They didn't judge. They didn't interrupt. They just sat in the fire with you. That moment probably stayed with you, not because they said something brilliant, but because they made you feel like you mattered. That's respect, not approval, not agreement, presence. And presence is power. Now think of how most people operate. We're addicted to noise, to our opinions, to the need to be right. And when someone speaks, we're already building our comeback in our heads. We don't hear them. We hear our assumptions. We hear our biases. And because of that, real connection never happens. We live in the same world, but not in the same reality. And then we wonder why relationships fall apart, why nations are divided, why people feel more alone than ever before. Deep listening is rebellion in a world that only values volume. It's saying, I'm not here to win this conversation. I'm here to understand. And that understanding can shift everything. It can disarm rage. It can heal wounds. It can build bridges where there were only walls. Because when someone feels deeply heard, they soften. Their guard drops, their heart opens. And in that moment, something sacred happens. Two humans meet beyond ideology, beyond pride, beyond fear. Peterson pushes people toward this because it requires humility. To truly listen, you have to let go of the need to be the smartest person in the room. You have to admit you might be wrong. That maybe, just maybe, the other person has a piece of truth you need. And that doesn't make you weak. That makes you wise, because strength isn't in dominating the conversation. It's in expanding your understanding. Daily life gives us thousands of chances to practice this. When your child is talking and you're tempted to correct instead of understand. When your partner is upset and you want to defend instead of listen. When a coworker is struggling and you want to offer advice instead of silence. Those are the moments where deep respect is born, not in grand gestures, but in small pauses and quiet patience. In choosing presence over pride, it's not easy. Listening deeply to someone you disagree with takes grit. It takes discipline to silence the war in your head and actually take in what the other person is saying, especially when their truth threatens yours. But that's where real growth begins. Not when you confirm what you already believe, but when you allow another voice to shape your vision. The people who carry influence, not just authority, are the ones who listen with their whole soul. They don't just hear words, they hear what's behind the words. They hear the pain, the fear, the hope. And because of that, their words carry weight. Because they've earned the right to speak through silence. They've trained themselves to absorb before they act. And in a noisy world, that kind of presence is unforgettable. You want to change someone's life. Listen to them. Not to respond, not to fix, just to witness.